One of the most important distinctions in qualitative research is the difference between experience and explanation. When this distinction is unclear, interviews become abstract, observations blur into interpretation, and analysis drifts away from what actually occurred in lived contexts. Qualitative research draws data from human settings. That data may come from interviews, observations, documents, artifacts, reflective journals, or field notes. Across all of these sources, a central analytic question remains. Are we examining lived experience, explanation of that experience, or the researcher's interpretation layered on top of both? Experience refers to what occurred and how it was lived. It includes actions, interactions, sequences of events, decisions, reactions, environments, and emotional responses within a specific context. Experience is situated. It happens somewhere, at a particular time, under particular conditions. Experience is not limited to emotion. It includes what someone did, what they chose not to do, how long something lasted, who was present, what was said, what changed as a result, and what did not change. It includes observable behavior, interactional patterns, pauses, hesitations, and moments of silence. Experience captures process as it unfolds. Explanation refers to how people interpret or make sense of what occurred. It includes beliefs, assumptions, narratives, and generalizations about why something happens. Explanation may move beyond a single event into broader claims about systems, norms, institutional practices, or cultural patterns. Both experience and explanation are legitimate forms of qualitative data. They are not ranked hierarchically. The issue is not which is superior. The issue is alignment. What does your research question require you to examine? Lived process? Meaning-making? Institutional interpretation? Identity construction? Your analytic stance determines how these layers function in your study. Consider two responses in an interview context. I opened the assignment, saw 5 pages of instructions, and immediately felt overwhelmed. I closed my laptop and waited until the next day. Versus. Students struggle because schools don't teach executive functioning skills. The first response describes lived experience. It includes action, context, sequence, and emotion. The second response offers a generalized explanation about a broader system. Both are meaningful, but they represent different layers of data. If your research question examines how learners experience independence when using AI tools, the first response directly addresses the question, because it shows how independence is enacted or disrupted in a specific moment. The second response may reveal beliefs about systemic shortcomings, but it does not describe a lived episode unless further explored. Experience-based data often includes temporal markers and situational detail. When this happened, after I tried, in that moment, during class, at home. Explanation-based data often includes generalizing language. The problem is, people tend to. The reason is, schools always. Recognizing these patterns helps clarify what layer of data is present. This distinction applies beyond interviews. In observation, experience-based data might look like: the teacher paused for 15 seconds after asking the question. 3 students lowered their heads. 1 student avoided eye contact. Explanation layered afterward might look like: the classroom culture discourages risk-taking. The first statement documents observable events. The second interprets those events. Both may appear in qualitative research, but they must be analytically distinguished. Strong qualitative work makes the boundary visible rather than allowing observation and interpretation to merge without clarity. The same distinction applies in document analysis. A student journal entry stating, "When I try to read long passages on my own, I lose my place and feel embarrassed asking for help," provides experiential data in written form. It describes a sequence, a difficulty, and an emotional response. A policy document stating, "Our institution prioritizes independence for all learners," provides an explanation-level claim about institutional values. It reflects a formal narrative, not direct evidence of lived independence. Both can be analyzed, but they represent different kinds of evidence. There are 3 layers that require careful separation in qualitative work. Participant experience. Participant explanation. Researcher interpretation. Participant experience is what was lived or observed. Participant explanation is how individuals interpret what they lived. Researcher interpretation is how the analyst synthesizes and analyzes those experiences and explanations within a conceptual or theoretical frame. Qualitative studies lose analytic clarity when these layers are not distinguished. Consider a finding statement such as, participants felt unsupported because the educational system does not teach independence. In that sentence, the lived experience of feeling unsupported is combined with a systemic claim. It is unclear whether the systemic explanation was directly stated by participants, inferred from documents, or introduced by the researcher. The layers are merged, and the analytic boundary becomes difficult to trace. A clearer version separates them. Participants described moments of feeling unsupported during assignments requiring independent planning. Several participants attributed these experiences to what they perceived as a lack of explicit instruction in executive functioning skills. Now the lived experience is visible. The participant explanation is identified as perception. Researcher interpretation has not been inserted without grounding. The analytic chain remains transparent and defensible. Experience and explanation can also overlap within a single statement. For example, a participant might say, "Teachers don't care." That may sound purely explanatory, but it may function as shorthand for a series of lived events. In such cases, analytic clarity requires unpacking the statement. A follow-up such as, "Can you describe a moment when you felt that way?" brings the conversation back to experience without dismissing the explanation. This distinction affects coding decisions. Experience-level data often codes as actions, interactions, processes, emotions, environmental conditions, or sequences. Explanation-level data often codes as beliefs, attributions, justifications, narratives, or values. Researcher interpretation belongs in analytic memos rather than being coded, as if it were participant data. It is also important to distinguish data from analysis. Transcripts, observation notes, documents, and artifacts constitute data. Coding, categorizing, and developing themes are analytic actions performed on those data. Themes are not raw data. They are analytic constructions grounded in data. This distinction also affects saturation. Explanation-level data often repeats quickly because generalized beliefs may be shared across participants. Experience-level data tends to reveal variation in context, sequence, and response. If analysis focuses only on explanation, saturation may appear prematurely. Depth of experience often extends analytic insight and nuance. The explanation distinction connects directly to phenomenon, tension, and consequence. If the phenomenon in a study is that AI functions as a scaffold for independence, that claim must be supported by experiential data showing how independence is enacted, facilitated, or hindered. If the tension asserts that current accommodations fail to build autonomy, experiential moments of reliance, hesitation, stalled progress, or mediated support must be visible in the data. General claims about systemic shortcomings are not sufficient to establish the tension. If the consequence involves long-term anxiety or dependency, the data must include descriptions of how anxiety manifests, how reliance develops, how confidence shifts, and how these patterns affect behavior over time. Abstract references to mental health concerns do not demonstrate lived impact. Consider a full alignment example. Research question: how do learners with dyslexia experience independence when using AI tools? Explanation-level data might sound like, AI is helpful because schools don't support us properly. Experience-level data might sound like, when I use the AI tool, I can break the assignment into steps myself. I don't have to wait for someone to explain it. I start working right away instead of staring at the page. That experiential description supports the phenomenon of AI functioning as a scaffold. It illustrates the tension between mediated support and autonomous initiation. It provides material for examining consequences such as reduced anxiety or increased confidence. The alignment becomes visible because the data describe lived process rather than abstract evaluation. Explanation is not weaker data. It reveals how participants construct meaning, assign responsibility, and interpret structures around them. In some qualitative traditions, explanation is central to analysis. The issue is not hierarchy. The issue is clarity about which layer is being examined and why. Ethical representation also depends on this distinction. When reporting explanation-level claims about institutions or systems, those claims should be framed as participant perceptions or narratives unless supported by additional evidence. Presenting participant explanations as objective fact without clarification blurs analytic boundaries. Throughout data collection and analysis, continually ask, is this a description of lived experience? Is this a participant's interpretation of that experience? Is this my analytic interpretation layered on top? This distinction shapes every stage of qualitative research. It influences how research questions are written, how interview prompts are phrased, how observations are recorded, how documents are analyzed, how coding is conducted, how themes are constructed, and how findings are presented. When experience and explanation are distinguished clearly and used intentionally, qualitative analysis becomes precise, transparent, and methodologically rigorous. When they are conflated, analytic claims become unstable and difficult to defend. Knowing what counts as data is foundational. It ensures that claims about phenomenon, tension, and consequence are grounded in lived reality, rather than detached abstraction.